Welcome to a new episode of the Opening Bid Unfiltered podcast. I'm Yahoo Finance Executive Editor Brian Sozzi. I am super excited about this next episode. In particular, CrowdStrike founder and CEO George Kurtz is in the house. George, I don't know how I got you to do this a couple of days before the holiday season. Nonetheless, it is good to see you again. I appreciate it.
It's good to see you, and you call, we answer, and here we are.
Yes, I wish it was that easy, but thank you. So last time I saw you, we talked at the Goldman Sachs Tech Conference, and we're talking about cybersecurity, talking about some AI. We get off camera, and you mentioned, "Oh yeah, Brian, I'm a competitive endurance driver," and I made a note to myself because I take a lot of pride in researching everybody that I interviewed. I didn't know that about you, and I was so upset. Let's start there. What made you get into this industry?
Racing?
Racing, yeah. Let's start racing. Like we always talk about cybersecurity. Let's talk some racing.
It's interesting. I mean, I've always been a gearhead. I always loved cars and going fast and the thrill of the adrenaline rush, if you will, and never had the opportunity to do it as a kid. So I got into it a little bit later in life, probably been doing it about 20 years now, and started really kind of at the, like many, you start at the club level and then you're like, this is pretty fun. I'm pretty good at it. And then went national and then bumped up into GT4, GT3 and LMP2. So, I don't get paid to be a race car driver, but it's a professional race car license and, race around the world doing that. So it's actually been pretty good.
You're being modest, George, because you've actually won things. For those listening on podcast platforms, like George has some really cool trophies behind him. So like, hat tip to you. That is awesome. How do you prepare for a race? Like, what is that day before a race? What are you doing?
Well, normally the race takes a long time. Like one of the things you see the Le Mans hat there, the Le Mans trophy is back there as well. And that was the 100th anniversary that I was fortunate enough to win in the LMP2 class. But some of those events are like a week long or, even longer. So you've got a lot of activities, you got a lot of preparation of the car, the data, the seats. I just got back from Asia and we had a race over the weekend in the rain in Sepang, which was really interesting because it just rained cats and dogs and it was on and off. One part of the track was rainy, the other part was sunny. But a lot of it is like, okay, you got to make sure the seat fits because you have different drivers for different series. And there's just a lot of things that have to happen. And then at the same time, I actually carry 2 Starlinks. So wherever I'm at, like I'm always connected. So between sessions, I'm, doing Zoom calls and I've done plenty of interviews between sessions. So I keep things rolling on the work front and kind of fit this all in. And then we actually do a lot of customer events around these sort of races. So there's always something to do. And the hardest part is context switching between like, what we're doing and then getting back on track, but make it all work.
I'm purposely not trying to ask you about cybersecurity right now. I'm forcing myself. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. So you're in these endurance races. And what if you had like a thought about CrowdStrike? Like, what do you do? Like, how do you manage all this stuff?
Well, when you're in the middle of the race, I guess maybe the good thing is you really can't focus on anything but the race, right? So you're not thinking about emails or text message or anything, but there's always something going on back at home, and you just try to manage it. But at the end of the day, you have meetings, you have work commitments, you get it all done, and you try to separate the two. And that's what I was saying, like the context switching between, sort of work mode versus race mode, it takes a different level of mental preparation, and you have to be really good at being able to context switch between the two. I think I've gotten pretty good. A lot of the pro guys that I actually race with, they're like, we don't know how you go back and forth between doing all this stuff. But you make it all work, and you have a little bit of fun, and a big part of our ethos, as many know, is racing between Formula One and some of the things that I do. So it's been part of the brand, and we bring people into the racing family, give them an experience, and spend some time with them, and generate some business out of it as well.
What's the similarities between CEO life and racing life? And like, what do you take from the boardroom to that day before a race or day of race?
Well, this is a good question because in racing, it's the small little details that matter. Like at the professional level, it's the small details, right? So it's the car preparation, It's the data analysis. It is the little things that separate, being on the podium and winning, being on the podium or winning from not. And it's incredibly competitive. And if you have to do all the right things. So it's not just about driving, it's making sure that all the preparation is in place and that you can execute. Are the pit stops right? Do you have the right tire pressures? Do you have the right tire? Like we're in Sepang, it was wet tires and it was dry tires, and you're out there in slicks, but it's still raining. So you have to do all that. But that's what separates the winners from the folks who don't win. And I think one of the takeaways, if you spend any time with a professional driver, these are kids. They started when they were 5 in karting. They're young. Some of the guys that I race with now that are professionals are like 19, 20. Some are in their mid-20s. And they look like video gamers outside. You run into them and you're like, you play Xbox all day. They're skinny guys and gals, but you see them and they're the nicest folks outside. And then when the visor comes down, they are assassins. I mean, you're like, I can't believe this 20-year-old kid who's so nice will just slice you up. So I think that level of like, they are going to win no matter what it takes, is something that you can basically bring between the boardroom and here. And it's about competition, about preparation, it's about execution, and it's about winning. And it's very clear who's going to win. You have a clock, and whoever and you have a leaderboard, and who's ever at the front is winning. And then no excuses, you move on.
So after the last time I saw you, September Goldman Sachs conference, I'm enjoying my life. A couple of weeks later, I get to the office. I see a press release. George Kurtz is buying a 15% stake in an F1 Mercedes team. I'm like, wait a second, George Kurtz, I know that guy. I just talked to him. He's the CEO of CrowdStrike, and he's the founder. Like, how did that even come about?
Well, we got to work with Mercedes really before our IPO in 2018. And part of it was we thought Formula One, which we still think is a great area of exposure for a company like CrowdStrike and technology. And before we IPO'd, we wanted more international experience. And just some facts, every Formula One race is pretty much bigger than a Super Bowl. Like, this is the worldwide audience, right? So it's massive exposure. And it's not just having your name on the car, which we have, and we've grown our relationship with Mercedes over the years, but it's also being able to host customers. It's about immersive experience, and it's about showing someone what Formula One's all about, but how security, how technology, how data all come together. So we've been doing that for the last number of years. And I got to know Toto Wolff really early on in the journey, and they became a customer of CrowdStrike. That's really how we got to know them. They were switching off some other endpoint technology, and they knew I was kind of a car guy. And then, the rest is history. So over the last couple of years, I've been chatting with him about, what other opportunities are there. And these sort of things take a while. There's only 10, now going to 11 teams. There's only one Mercedes team. So these are really coveted opportunities that just don't come around, and they're very protective of who would get into the ownership group. So worked on that for a couple of years. We were able to put it together, and I'm delighted to say that I'm now a technical advisor with them, working on both commercial as well as sort of leveraging data for on-track performance. If we think about AI and data, it's a big part of what's going to happen in not only motorsports, but in sports in general.
How will AI change the racing experience, but even the car itself? How will it change how drivers interact with the vehicle?
Well, Formula One has been a losing proposition for teams for many years until the cost cap came into place. I think it was 21, and now you see the value of these Formula One teams. So what that means is that all of the money that they used to spend just on limited testing and, wind tunnel time and those sort of things, they're all managed now. And being able to leverage data, being able to simulate from data, being able to use AI to come out with better performance on the car is going to be incredibly important, because you can't just throw unlimited dollars at it. So with the cost cap, with the fact that basically the car is a rolling computer, and it's terabytes of data that gets sent back from wherever the car is racing, even back to the factory in Brackley. All that can be analyzed, even on track. What decisions you make, who's doing what tires are in play, what is it, tire degradation. And there's so many variables that go into it that if you can get that right, I think, in my opinion, AI is going to dramatically increase the on-track performance.
If I'm Mercedes, I'm like, wow, I just got an ultra competitive guy on my team right now. Another ultra competitive guy in George Kurtz. Like, how do you get Mercedes back to number one? I mean, this is an iconic team. Like, what do you have planned over the next 24 months?
Well, look, I'm one small piece of the operation there. Obviously, Toto's running it, put together an amazing team, 8 championships. And, now next year we've got a change in car, a change in engine, and new regulations. DRS is gone, and obviously the engine package is different. So we got to see what all that looks like. I think, there's always going to be reliability issues up and down the grid for everyone. So we'll see how that sorts out. But I think, look, if I can help in the areas of understanding and making sense of data, and they've got a team of people to do that. So, I provide my input, provide my guidance, and think about what we can do. And then also on the commercial side, being able to leverage technology, particularly in North America, and my relationships to drive commercial success is important. So like anything else, it's a team sport, and I'm here to help. But there's a great team in place already, led by Toto.
Adding the new team on the grid, how does that change the complexion of F1, you think?
Well, I think it's exciting because when you look at Cadillac, they're investing heavily. They've recruited a lot of great people from all the teams. There's no shortage of budget, and they're first going to leverage a lot of the Ferrari technology to get up and running before they kind of build everything themselves. But I think it's going to be amazing. It's great to have a U.S. team and a team from North America to really fight on the grid, and I think it's good for the sport, and we'll see where it all lands. But from my perspective, it's going to be interesting as a first year team just how quickly they can get up to speed. But I know they're starting with a good base because they've got some great people that they were able to recruit across a number of teams that are out there. So I look forward to it.
If I don't pivot to cybersecurity, my team's going to make me post this interview on Yahoo Sports. And there would be nothing wrong with that. But give me a second, George. We're going to go off for a very short break. We'll be right back. We'll talk some cybersecurity. We'll talk some AI. We'll be right back with Opening Bid Unfiltered. All right, welcome back to Opening Bid Unfiltered. Having a great conversation with CrowdStrike founder and CEO George Kurtz. We spent about 13 minutes talking about his new involvement in Mercedes, what he plans to do there. I want to pivot because we got to talk some cybersecurity. CrowdStrike, of course, still a publicly traded company. They report earnings. They do earnings call transcripts, all that stuff. 2026, George, what does that have in store for your company?
Well, I think it's a continuation of what we've been doing, which is creating and landing with our platform, Falcon, helping companies consolidate, drive down cost and complexity, and continuing to focus on our mission of stopping breaches. And if you look at what CrowdStrike does as opposed to a lot of other companies, we're not building a whole bunch of other things outside of security. Our whole mission in life is to build the best technology combined with the best services to stop adversaries and stop the breach. And that's going to be the continuation. If you look at our success, we reported our quarterly numbers a few weeks back. If you look at our growth and re-acceleration in net new ARR is a record 265. If you look at our free cash flow, almost 300 million, 296. It's incredible. If you look at our operating income, all records across the board. And I think what it really tells you is the fact that cybersecurity is needed. CrowdStrike is the right company for it. And the platform approach is winning, combined with the right licensing mechanism we call Falcon Flex, which has really accelerated the adoption of CrowdStrike, making it easy, friction-free, and the ability to use all of our modules for our customers. And we always report out on the number of modules that are used. We keep increasing the number of module attaches to our, from a customer perspective. And I think that's really a true indication of a platform. So we're going to continue to do more of that. Obviously, AI is going to be important in securing AI. I know we're going to talk a little bit about it, but that's the game plan.
Yeah, on AI, there was a good JP Morgan report I recently read. And for the folks out there that are not super plugged into all things cybersecurity. This note mentioned with AI, it increases the attack surface for potential attacks, I guess, on companies. Like, break that down first. What is the impact you're seeing because there are AI agents starting to run amok inside companies?
Well, from our perspective, an AI agent is nothing more than a superhuman. It has an identity, non-human identity. In fact, customers are actually giving it employee numbers. If you can believe that.
No, I can't believe that. That's the first time I heard that, actually.
Yes, absolutely true. Because they need to keep track of all of them, so they're giving them employee ID numbers. They have access to data, just like a human does, but lots of it in different places. They have access to compute, right? And they have access to different workflows and systems that are across in and outside the network. So what a human can do in a day, an AI agent can do in a second, and obviously that introduces risk. So a big part of our focus as a company is protecting all these AI agents. And in the fall, we acquired a company called Pangea, which is focused on protecting AI and AI agents and creating guardrails around what can happen. And there's really, I mean, there's multiple areas, but just to simplify it, you sort of have like the prompt layer, which is, people putting data in prompts and public LLMs and not really thinking about and where does that data go and what does it mean and what kind of data goes out, comes back. So putting guardrails around that, and putting guardrails around the fact that if you have your own LLMs, you have people that want to take advantage, and adversaries and other AI, to be honest, that want to extract information out of that LLM that maybe they shouldn't get. So you have something called prompt injection and even indirect prompt injection, and you need to be able to protect against that, which means that if you are offering a service publicly, maybe it's a travel site and, that has your information and it's helping you book a trip. But if you construct the question in a certain way, maybe it's going to give you information about all the other customers, right? So you have to protect against that. So the risk is really been magnified from just like, hey, I can get to somebody's information by exploiting a database vulnerability, to like, I can get to almost anything you want, including secrets, by giving it the right prompt. So that's sort of one. And then two is putting the guardrails around these AI agents. And one of the things that Pangea has really invented now with CrowdStrike is something we call AIDR, AI detection and response. So you're familiar with EDR, which is endpoint detection and response, but you have to instrument the AI agents. You have to understand what it's doing, what the results are, what it's touching. You have to have visibility, and from a compliance perspective and from a prevention perspective, you have to be able to look at every step of what's happening and be able to record that and then be able to protect against bad things. So if you are a bank and you're releasing an AI agent internally, well, as a human, you have to watch what the human's doing. It's just by regulation, for compliance reasons, you have to do that. The same thing with an agent. You can't just release an agent, which I call, sometimes the AI agents like letting a, drunk intern on your network. Like, who knows what's going to happen,
Yeah.
right? So you have to be able to protect against it, and you have to have compliance, and that's going to drive a lot of opportunity for CrowdStrike.
You're literally in the trenches with agents and protecting companies. Do you find all this talk about an AI bubble totally absurd? Now, I understand where these critiques are coming from. I actually do not agree with it. I do not think we're in a bubble, but you would know better than me.
You have to define what bubble is, right? Is bubble something that's all hyped up and then just has no utility and, people lose a lot of money? I don't think so, because I think AI is fundamentally going to change the way we do everything in this world. And I'm sure most of the listeners here and the viewers will remember the Chat GPT moment, the first time they used it, right? And I remember the first time I used the World Wide Web, dating myself. But that was like, when it first came out, and there weren't even like firewalls. So it's going to change fundamentally business. It's going to change society, and there's risk associated with that. But from a bubble perspective, I think there's going to be a handful of sort of like AI winners, and then you're going to see the large number of AI application and users that are going to win and drive velocity, revenue in their business, and drive down the cost. How it's financed, what that looks like, is there a bubble, and all these sort of circular things that happen with companies, that remains to be seen. But I think the technology is solid. There's real revenue associated with it. But at the end of the day, some of these foundation type models are going to be commoditized. And I think the real winners are going to be the folks who can drive outcomes using software and AI. And that's one of the things that people always talk about. Well, what happens to software? Is AI going to kill software? No, like you're not going to be able to get to an outcome without the software, and AI is just going to help you get there.
Are companies like CrowdStrike, are you managing an unsolvable problem? I would think that is why so many people are bullish on your company, some of your competitors. I mean, cybersecurity is just not going to go away. I mean, especially with agents now, these problems are only going to have to get worse.
I did a talk at our Falcon conference in the fall in Vegas, where we had it, and I basically said, industry stat, that each human will have 90 agents in an enterprise that they have to manage, doing all kinds of different tasks. So is it untenable? I don't think it's untenable, but you have to use AI to fight AI. And what we're seeing with these AI attacks is that they're becoming much more sophisticated, and they're dramatically decreasing the time that defenders have to be able to protect themselves. So this sort of window of exposure that used to be months, then weeks, then days, then hours, now minutes. In one case, we put this in one of our threat reports. We saw an adversary be able to compromise and pivot a system in 51 seconds. It's incredible. So you're going to need AI to fight AI, and you're going to need to protect all these AI agents. So we think it's a great opportunity, but like anything else, the landscape is dramatically shifting. And what we're finding, we sort of talk about this adversary pyramid. And what we're finding is that there's many more adversaries that are being created. So let me just give you the visual on this. If you think about a pyramid, at the top of the pyramid, you have nation state. So the most sophisticated, but the least number of sort of adversaries. There's a lot of them, but just, by number, it's less than the midsection of the pyramid, which is e-crime. You have nation state, then you have e-crime. And e-crime, you've got a lot more, and the sophistication level is pretty darn good. And then at the base of the pyramid, you have hacktivists who maybe are less sophisticated, but you have a lot of them. They can deface websites and those sort of things. So what we're finding with AI is you're really democratizing destruction in the fact that you're minting many more adversaries. You can go into, a Claude, and you may have seen some of the reports that came out from Anthropic of adversary. In fact, it was Chinese that was doing this, but adversaries using LLMs to be much more creative in the attacks, to cut down the window of exposure or the window the defender has to actually prevent against these attacks. And the third piece is actually drive unique attacks. So by using prompts, each time you're prompting it, it basically is making the attack unique, the attack sort of chain. And that makes it hard for defenders. So there is a huge opportunity out there, but you're going to have to use AI to protect against many more adversaries that are being created with a lot more. If you think about the base of the pyramid and the sophistication 3 years ago, it was a lot lower. Now with Gen AI, the base of the pyramid, which is the bottom, is much higher in terms of level of soffistication.
Well said. I do want to end this real quickly on where I started it, on racing. What is your weekend track car and why? And why did you pick that?
My weekend track car, well, that's a broad question. I got a bunch of weekend track cars from
your favorite.
My favorite is a Ford, just track car, not like race car, is a Ford GT Mark IV, which is pretty much like a DTM car. And it's just an amazing car that performs really well on the track. So, but when I go on the track, a lot of times I'm just practicing in a GT3 or an LMP2. But
Jealous. I'm so jealous. We're going to leave
And
it there. Yeah, go ahead.
And I will say, if you haven't seen it, we just did another Driving Ambition, which is on YouTube. If you go to our CrowdStrike channel, which was, I was able to drive the 2022 car, Formula One car, Mercedes in Abu Dhabi.
Wow.
So I went through that whole experience and we documented that. So that's kind of a fun thing to take a look at.
That will be my weekend YouTube watching for sure. Again, that's another thing. I keep missing all these fun, like racing moments with you, George. Thank you for doing this. And like I told you at the Goldman conference, please be safe, dude. Come on, when you're driving these cars, they're so fast. CrowdStrike founder. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, that's the nice thing about it is you're strapped in, you got a helmet and a roll cage. So I'll be safe for you.
All right. Thank you. All right. CrowdStrike founder and CEO George Kurtz. Always good to see you. Thanks for making time for me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right. That's it for the latest episode of Opening Bid Unfiltered. Keep that feedback coming on YouTube and all the podcast platforms. I love it all. It makes me better at doing these interviews. Talk soon.